Section 5, Time of Crisis. How did the combination of plague, upheaval in the church, and war affect Europe in the 13 and 1400s? So one of the things I'd be thinking about all the way throughout this is, where is all of this going? What does this all mean? The plague, the schism, the Hundred Years' War, what does this all mean for Europe at the end of this period? The first objective, understand the social and economic impact of the Black Death. Through the first objective, understand the social and economic impact of the Black Death. Hopefully through answering those questions and looking at those websites, we really don't need to do too much with the causes, but it is the bubonic plague, and in some cases the pneumonic plague, carried by fleas on rats, spreads from Asia to Europe along trade routes. Now, one of the things is for vocab words. Epidemic is a rapidly spreading disease. A pandemic is a widely spread geographic disease. So in the case of the Black Death, it's both an epidemic in that it spreads rapidly and a pandemic in that it affects Asia, Europe, and Africa, or parts of Africa as well. The Black Death in Europe. One of the things with the Black Death is people really go to their church and they ask their priests and they ask their bishops, why is this happening? Why is this happening to us? We're good people. We go to church on Sundays. We follow the commandments. Why are innocent people dying? And the church really doesn't have a good answer. And that's one of the things that's going to impact the church down the road. But people turn to magic, they flee cities, they hide in their homes, they look for scapegoats, and a lot of times the Jews are blamed for bringing this disease. But socially, it erodes the whole fabric of society because they don't really understand what's happening. They don't know that it is a disease carried by fleas, that once you're bit, it spreads. They don't know any of that. And so they're looking for easy answers, and a lot of times they turn to magic and superstitions and myths to help them try and cope. Regardless of that, the effects of the Black Death are pretty well known. About a third of the population dies, somewhere around 35 million people. Production declines, there's just fewer workers to do all the work. That's also going to lead to inflation because people are able to charge higher prices for their labor, and in order to still make the same amount of money, that means the owners, business owners, have to raise the prices of goods. There's revolts, and part of that is because of the lack of people, the lack of leadership, but also at this time there's a climate change going on known as the Little Ice Age, and that's going to lower the temperatures around the world for a period of several hundred years, which means there's less food, which is also going to lead to more revolts. Objective 2, describe the problems facing the church in the late Middle Ages and how the church reacted. So what are some of the factors? One is the plague. You know, like I mentioned earlier, people are wondering and asking the church, why is this happening? How come God isn't protecting us? And there isn't any real strong leadership in the church. And a lot of times they shirk from the responsibility of the plague. There are some good priests who go in there and give last rites, but some are afraid of doing anointing of the sick, and they're afraid of getting the plague, and they don't do that, and that really causes people to doubt them even more. Probably most important is this schism, and we mentioned that earlier. There was at one point in time several different popes. Well, Pope Clement moves the papacy to Avignon, France. And when they're in Avignon, France, it gets to be kind of a ritzy, glitzy shindig. And there's a lot of wealth and a lot of extravagance. And people start to begin to question, what is the church more concerned with? Gathering up all these worldly goods or in saving souls? So what ends up happening is they elect a new pope in Rome, and now we have two popes. And at the worst point, there's three different popes. And this really causes a problem because who is the real pope? Will the real pope please stand up? And no one really knows. If this guy excommunicates me, am I really excommunicated? And people just don't know. And the division of the leadership really amplifies the lack of leadership, and it's going to weaken the power and the prestige of the church, and it's really going to bring about the end of the age of faith. How does the church respond to this weakened state? and their ability to respond to the challenges of the teachings and ideas of reformers, they're just not able to. Reformers are calling for change. Why do we have three popes? Why are people worried, or popes worried, about worldly goods, not religious problems and salvation of souls? And so what reformers really call for is getting religion to the people. They translate the Bible in other languages. They translate it into Czech. They translate it into German. They translate it eventually into English. The church doesn't like this because they want it to be done the way that they want it to be done, and they are resisting translating the Bible from Latin into vernacular. And so these individuals get persecuted, and some of them get put to death. And so they're not really able to deal with these challenges, and they respond by persecuting and putting people to death. Summarize the causes, turning points, and effects of the Hundred Years' War is the last objective for this section. The causes, remember, going all the way back to William, English rulers had always held French lands, and they want to hold on to these French lands. Well, French kings want to extend their power and get the English the heck out of France. And both countries want to control the English Channel and the trade that flows through that channel. So these two countries have been on a bit of a course for quite a while. Sooner or later, they're going to have to duke it out, and someone was going to have to win or lose. Someone was going to have to conquer both, or else they're going to have to become separate. And eventually, that's what happens. So if we look at the turning points, early on, England is winning because of the longbow. Knights are no longer effective. From this longbow, they're able to shoot from a long ways off. It pierces through the armor of knights. There's nothing the knights can do. And it looks like England is going to win the war. Next thing you know, a peasant girl comes to the King of France and says, God has told me I am here to save France. So the king gambles, lets her take an army. She inspires the French troops. They rally. They start to fight against the English. Joan of Arc is betrayed and she's turned over to the English. What the English don't realize is that her execution is going to unite the French like no other event can. And her execution is really going to turn the tide of the war. The French use the cannons, Joan of Arc's memory, and they drive the English out of France. The effects of the Hundred Years' War. French kings are going to become even stronger than they were before. They're able to take this newfound land, this newfound strength, and this newfound French identity that people are feeling. They're feeling a sense of French pride, and they're able to build on that. For English kings, though, it's a different story. Parliament gains the power of the purse. Throughout the war, the English kings had to beg Parliament for money. And now what Parliament can do is they can cinch that purse shut when they want to get kings to do what they want. The English are now going to churn the trade. They're kind of done worrying about holding on to their lands in France, and they're going to look to new ways to make money and to make a profit, and that's going to lead to the age of exploration and the commercial revolution that you're going to learn about a little bit later on. The other thing is castles, knights, and feudalism and vassals. All of those things are pretty much outdated. Knights are going to get killed by the longbow. Castles get destroyed by new cannons. And kings need permanent armies. They don't need vassals anymore. So kings are going to start to build up these large armies. They're going to pay for them through taxes, and feudalism is about done. So going back to that very beginning focus question, the Black Death means fewer people, which means fewer workers, which means survivors get higher wages, which means people are now leaving the manors, and that's going to be a breakdown of the manor system, which was a key to feudalism. The schism, there's more than one pope. People question who the real pope is. Respect for the church goes down, and that's going to lead to the end of the Age of Faith, which was also a key part of feudalism. The Hundred Years' War, France and England are in separate paths. New weapons means no more knights, no more castles, permanent armies, no more feudalism. So all three of these things mean that feudalism is on its way out, and Europe is about ready to enter into the modern age.